I also have a BA and MA in history. And when I came into the New York City Department of Education, I was told I was lacking some of the education credits needed. I then had to go back and do a certificate program to get that. The great thing about CSI in our history program, and it's a program we have in the department that's not really talked about that much, is the History BA 7 to 12 program. And that will then funnel students through the proper content area as well as the pedagogical stuff. Students that are going through the MA program have a bit of an advantage. We find that many teachers who are now social studies teachers, getting a little long in the tooth, are now getting ready to retire, and they did not have a master's degree in history. In fact, they got their master's degree in education and are totally missing some of that graduate level history content that would be so beneficial in a K-12 classroom. And something we provide is that excellent content that you can then apply to a K-12 classroom. After my time as a grad student in history, I then went on to the Doctor of Education program at Northeastern University. There, my focus was history and social studies education. So for example, I would take some of the excellent scholarship that Professor Smith-Peter and some of the other historians in the department would create, and I would then structure curriculum and instruction around that, creating unit plans and lesson plans, and taking real great content that's published and bringing it to the classroom in a structured manner for students to really get the best effect they could from that. So that's my background in a nutshell, so to speak. We find that we have a lot of our graduates going into the Department of Education. In fact, recent number I received from the School of Ed was 87% of graduates, whether it's from our history program or the School of Ed, that become teachers wind up in the New York City Department of Education. And to go through some of our alumni list, as you heard Professor Smith-Peter mention, I undertook a huge project over the summer where I was really tracking to see where some of our alumni wound up. And a large chunk of them did wind up in the New York City Department of Education. In fact, some pretty recent graduates are now at Staten Island Technical High School as colleagues of mine. So not only are they getting into the DOE, which has been pretty challenging to do with hiring freezes, but they're getting into some of the best high schools that New York City has to offer. Some have wound up at Brooklyn Tech, as well as Bronx Science. Then you have them scattered all over. There were two that I tracked down at Stuyvesant High School. One is retired, and that has been one of the top ranked high schools in the United States year after year after year. So that's on that end. We do have other students, other alumni that have gone on into the Parks Department as well as the museum world. We have one alumni who is now the chief curator at the National Museum for the United States Army down in Virginia. Now, I'm a prior service soldier in the United States Army, and I've been to that museum, and I can tell you it is one of the greatest museums for military history that we have in this country. And one of our alumni is the chief curator there. We have another alumni who's gone on to become a chief librarian at the Library of Congress down in Washington, D.C. Another amazing job. We've had a bunch of others go through the Parks Department, presently there. We have another alumni down at Rutgers running the entire Veterans Affairs Department for any recently discharged troops going back to college. She runs the whole program there. And as I said before, the rest are New York City Department of Ed teachers. Some have went on to schools in Jersey. Some have went upstate New York, but a large chunk have come into the New York City Department of Education. So that's the pathway that we found our alumni taken. And with this explosion of public history now happening, I'm sure over the next few years, and I'm sure Mr. Santiago can discuss this, you're going to be seeing more entering the field of public history, which I believe is going to be the next big thing in the history education field happening. In fact, even in the New York City Department of Education, with the massive social justice initiatives that we're finding, public history has a huge place that's being shaped as we speak in the New York City Department of Education alone. So it'd be a great add-on to have that certificate to the degree as well. But can I answer any questions that some of you might have on the path that history majors or history MA students can take to becoming a social studies teacher or moving on to an EDD program?
People don't want to.
I think they all want to be PhD students. That's how excited they are about history.
Okay. All right. Well, Carlos, do you want to go?
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Smith-Peter and Dr. Frushi. Like they said, my name is Carlos Santiago. I am the digital collections assistant at the NYG&B, and I've been there for close to 3 years now. And just a little background on me, I got my BA in history at the University of Buffalo. I got my MA in history at Brooklyn College. And then I managed to get the public history certificate at CSI. And like many students kind of on the history track, you know, excited for that PhD, that's kind of where I wanted to go. That's the only path I really was aware of. I thought it was either become a PhD student or become a high school teacher. And that's pretty much how I approached my entire grad school experience to a degree. And it wasn't until a professor of mine from Buffalo, you know, she ended up mentioning the field of public history. And that's kind of like when the door opened, at least in my own head, of considering something completely different and out of the realm of academic history. And that's when I ended up encountering the program, the public history program at CSI. And you know, thankfully, I was able to get in and take a few of the courses. And honestly, it was one of the best decisions I ever made, just because it gave me tools that I wasn't really considering sharpening, at least at the time. I was very focused on writing super hyper specific things for the academy. Like my specific topic is on tourism in Puerto Rico, so that's very specific, and it can get into really wild theoretical you know, branches. But you know, public history at CSI taught me that I can communicate this stuff to everyone. But not only that, it taught me how to look at work as a collaborative process. You know, as Dr. Smith-Peter and Dr. Frushi will say, like a lot of history work involves collaboration. And I would say public history is probably one of the best examples of collaboration within like the circle of historians, because we have to borrow from each other. And also everyone has very different skills. Some people are very good at graphic design that are public historians. There are people that are very good at writing that are public historians, that are, you know, that you don't have to be this very specific type of historian to be a public historian. And that's not to say academics don't have these skills, but from what I've experienced, they don't necessarily apply it as much as public historians. And some of the examples that I have is the job that I have right now. I've had to pick up very specific skills on how to digitize collections, how to create metadata, how to you know, how to even engage with board members and donors. That's a really big thing as a public historian. You have to be able to network with people that have money or have connections, because a lot of the places that we work are nonprofits, and we need funding of some sort. So it really gets into, at least my job gets into a lot of different territories. But like I said, it's a very winding and very fulfilling process, to be honest with you. As you navigate that. And I guess my other example outside of work, I do, I write like historical articles, and I'm in the middle of writing a book proposal as we speak, where I'm using my public history skills outside of work. And that's amazing, just due to the fact that I can interact with other institutions like the Weeksville Heritage Center, or reach out to some of the people that I know at the National Archives or what have you, and I can ask about certain projects that they're doing, or ask about something that I can contribute to. So I don't necessarily have to stay pigeonholed into one thing. So essentially, I would say my biggest argument for trying to go this route is that while it's very daunting that you probably have a lot of options, whether it's PhD, public history in the realm of, museums, archives, and, many others that I can't think of at the moment, like as huge as that might feel, in reality, it's what ends up getting you the opportunity to begin with, because you can kind of dip your toes into things as you go along, as I did. At one point, like I said, academic, then, museum. I wanted to be involved in museums at some point. Like I wanted to be involved in archives at some point. I wanted to be involved in genealogy even, and a lot of those things didn't really work for me. But that's okay. I was able to pick up a lot of skills along the way, though. So you don't have to feel trapped into one thing. And in the end, the more skills you pick up, the higher the chance you have of finding a job. So just really keep that in mind. You're not limited. Make sure to network and speak to people, and try to send the occasional email. Sometimes that could be very hard, but it will take you places. Talk to your professors, talk to your classmates, and just try to interact in fruitful ways. So that's the best argument I could give you from my side. So if you have any specific questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them, because I have a pretty interesting roadmap as to how I got here.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. That was Carlos Santiago, obviously. Thank you so much. And so I just want to thank everyone here, and we'll go now to questions. And